Hey guys, this is Justin. Hello and welcome to another video. I hope you find today's interesting because I'm going to do something a little bit different and try to blend a discussion of in-universe lore with writing styles and the real-world rationale between certain decisions. And the question we're looking at today is, why are militaries, fleets, armies, etc. in Star Wars so small? What's the in-universe reason for this? And of course, what's the out-of-universe reason? And before you say, well, Justin, they're so small because ILM could only get models for 30 Star Destroyers on screen at once, or it'd be difficult to animate thousands of Venators at the Battle of Coruscant. I agree, you're completely right, that's definitely one reason. But Star Wars' issue with scale seems to extend to points where numbers don't really matter as much, to books, to comics. Compare that to something like Halo, where I think the universe generally does a little bit better with scale. According to the terminals in Halo 3, for example, when talking with the end of the Forerunner Flood War, we hear of millions upon millions of ships clashing against each other in an ultimate battle. Star Wars doesn't go in that direction very often, if at all, so let's talk about it. And I will say, there is one exception here, the Battle of Exegol, which I'll probably talk about at the end of the video, but that actually maybe gets scale a bit more right. Anyway, the most well-documented eras of Star Wars are obviously the original and prequel trilogy eras. Not only do we have the 3 movies in both of those time periods, but also a ton of expanded universe material and a lot of weird scaling issues. I've already alluded to the Battle of Endor, which was Palpatine's ultimate trap, where he attempted to destroy the Rebel fleet in one fell swoop, but ultimately just had a fraction of a percent of his overall fleet. There's, of course, Attack of the Clones, where they talk about ordering millions of clones rather than the trillions upon trillions that you'd need to fight a galaxy-wide war. And going even to the expanded universe, there really aren't a whole lot of battles where the scale gets beyond that. One example would be the Battle of Coruscant. Obviously, the depictions of the fleet there are still pretty substantial, but they're greatly elevated in, for example, the Republic Commando novels, which describe thousands of ships present. That's a rarity. Most times, the numbers are a lot more conservative. The Battle of Yuuzhan Tar, which was the ultimate battle of the Yuuzhan Vong War, seeing the entire galaxy come together against the Vong, had the fleets in hundreds. The final battle of the Thrawn campaign, the Battle of Bilbringi, had a similar number of ships to the Battle of Endor, and really a lot of what we get is, well, very large battles, but not seeing thousands of ships going head to head like we might expect. Let's talk about the in-universe reasons, and again, a lot of the information we have can be tied to the original or prequel trilogy. Let's talk about the OT first. As I've discussed in many videos, what we see on screen when it comes to the Rebel Alliance doesn't necessarily match all of what we get in the expanded universe material. Books like, say, The Essential Guide to Warfare or various source books all paint the Rebel Alliance as, yes, having a main fleet, but also being a loose collection of cells from small to large size. This matches what we've seen in shows like Star Wars Rebels. We know that this loose collection allows the Alliance to serve across the galaxy without having a single big footprint, meaning that the Empire can never truly strike a killing blow, and that they can use guerrilla warfare to attack the Empire where cracks are shown in their defenses. And that's why Rebel hit and run attacks using Y-Wings and whatever else were so effective. And it's really that which prevents battles from being any larger, at least in universe. Yes, the Rebel fleet that we see in the Battle of Endor is a substantial portion of their forces, but if you read The Essential Guide to Warfare, you'll know that the Rebel Alliance took great cares to ensure that other sectors of space that they held would still be protected. And that alone is actually a justification for a lot of the limiting sizes we see of these battles. It's very, very infrequent that a faction in Star Wars will dedicate all of their resources to one place, to one major battle. When that does happen, we do sometimes see massive amounts of capital ships, like with Palpatine's fleet in Dark Empire, but generally, although a major important battle is happening, that is still just a small look at the overall war. A really good example of this on the Imperial side would be Thrawn and the Battle of Bilbringi. Although the Battle of Bilbringi did lead to the death of Thrawn, his campaign was really just a part of larger Imperial strategy. Now, that was a strategy that he was leading at that point, but we know from various sources that Thrawn ordered many of the the Imperial fleets, including that of Artus Kane and the Pentastar alignment, to simply defend their borders as he was aggressively pushing with his Star Destroyers. Sometimes he had 6, sometimes at larger engagements he had 30 plus, but really much of his resources were dedicated to holding key points, and of course, if those were moved, then the rebels could have moved in and destroyed a major shipyard or inflicted some other really critical blow to the Empire's war efforts. The same is true at the Battle of Endor. What we see on the Imperial side is basically Death Squadron with an expanded role. Again, Palpatine didn't want to leave any one section of the galaxy super undefended because the rebels could hit it, not only injuring the Empire, but also weakening the alluring nature of his trap. Going to the Clone Wars, it's basically the same thing. The Republic is not going to dedicate hundreds or thousands of ships to a single battle when they've got an entire war to fight. And where we do see key engagements like the Battle of Coruscant, there does seem to be appropriate numbers, at least on paper. And that's the big thing. A lot of what I'm doing now is justifying what we see on screen with lore that was clearly developed later in encyclopedias and source books and more. And that's because the real reason for a lot of this is that Star Wars often has a problem with the universe's scale. There are a lot of reasons for this. For one, a lot of the big battles in Star Wars lore do happen on screen, so you're limited by technology. But Star Wars is also a series focused on individuals. Luke blows up the Death Star. Lando blows up the second Death Star. We know most of the people at the Battle of Hoth, or at least we know what they look like, and that adds a lot to the movie, and the same is extended to the books. I think it fits the feeling of Star Wars a lot more if we know it's Corran Horn and Wedge Antilles waging the fight against the Empire than thousands of unknown X-Wing pilots. So where a battle first appears in a narrative experience like a comic or a book or a TV show or whatever, rather than as a reference in an encyclopedia or something else, it seems like the battles generally tend to be on the smaller scale, or at least that's what we see as watchers or readers. I do think Star Wars has a greater issue with scale overall, and this is kind of because of its tone. Star Wars has always been sort of a space western. Everyone knows each other. There's 10 planets or so that everyone frequently visits, and we see these issues in pretty much every area when they can show up. I think of the Michael Stackpole Rogue Squadron books, where the ships have weapons that fire at ranges less than a kilometer. Is that practical for space combat? Is that practical for a large-scale universe? Probably not, but it seems to fit the tone of Star Wars being an analog to like World War II in space better than the alternative, them firing from beyond enemy sight. Of course, we see some authors push back against this general attempt to make things small scale. Famously, there's Curtis Saxton in the ridiculous Star Wars cross-section books where ships can fire light minutes away and do all these crazy things that doesn't match any actual narrative depiction. But to me, it all comes down to tone. And yeah, Star Wars is a small universe in pretty much every sense of the word, other than what the reference books tell you about the number of planets that exist. But guys, that's my brief video. Did you enjoy it? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Is there something you'd like to see me cover next? Let me know all of that and more down below. Until next time, guys, be safe, have a good one, and may the Force be with you.